Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar Wednesday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Phelps, and I'm the Marketing Director here at Acumen. And today we brought in Dan and Aaron from Manusonic to go over workforce management solutions that can automate your time and attendance with Sage 300 and Sage Intacct. Throughout the webinar, Dan and Aaron will give a brief overview of their device options and then dive deeper into a live demonstration. But before we begin, please note that this webinar should last roughly around 45 minutes. And if you have any questions, then please use the chat option and we'll answer near the end of the presentation. With that said, I'll now pass it on to Dan.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for joining us, everybody, today. Appreciate your time. My name is Dan Papaconstantino. I'm with Manusonic. I have Aaron Zabudsky from our development team that's going to help us out in the presentation today. So just before we begin, Manusonic is basically a Sage tech partner or ISV or third-party developer, and we work with partners like Acumen across the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean, providing a very custom-tailored, bespoke type implementation of time and attendance. We integrate to all the Sage products, including ERP, payroll, job costs, some of the ancillary products like manufacturing and service management as well, depending on what product that you're using. So there's a number of ways that we integrate, as well as the payroll products that Sage offers. So before we begin, I'll just talk a little bit about, some of the problems that we solve for our clients. A few of these things contain things like buddy punching or time theft. Buddy punching is a term that's used in our industry, and it really relates to employees just not being very honest about clocking in or clocking out. So, oftentimes you'll have someone showing up late for work and calling a friend to have them clock in on their behalf, or maybe they want to leave a little early. They want someone else to clock them out at the end of their shift. So that's one of the things that we have. And it's not always just about time theft or buddy punching. A lot of our clients need to know when their employees are actually physically in the building. So this is one way that we can determine by clocking in with a biometric device, when the employee's in, who's in. And we have a real-time view in our portal, in the manager portal, that'll tell you exactly, who's in the building and when they clocked in and if they left as well. And you'll see that in our PowerPoint presentation, or in our demo, actually. So manual paper time cards. So employees who are physically filling in a paper time card. These time cards have to be physically submitted to managers for approval. Sometimes there's spreadsheets, and it just takes time. And again, when you're filling out a time card, you're not going to be too honest about your time sometimes. So, and then there's errors due to loss due to manually keying this time into your payroll system. So if you have currently a payroll administrator that has to either look at spreadsheets and then copy them or key them in manually into your payroll system, there's often, it takes some time to do that, and there's often errors that happen in that process. The other thing that really plagues a lot of our clients before we get started in our implementation with them is just managing leave, paid time off, vacation time, family time, personal time. Our system generates all the accruals in our system. When we do an implementation, we'd ask you all the, we find out what all the plans are that you're accruing time for. Our system automatically accrues those time off plans, so that employees know exactly how much time they have in their balance or in their bank. And there's restrictions that prevent employees from just taking time off if they haven't actually accrued that time off. So we manage that, we calculate all those accruals, and then we also manage it. And there's that whole request for time off process that has to happen. And there's that restriction that occurs. So the manager's reviewing time and somebody's asking for more time that they have available, our system will deny or prevent the manager from approving that time off if so desired. And the other thing that our our clients are having problems with is getting time into jobs or projects or orders. Our system is fully integrated with the job cost and projects in Sage 300 and Intacct. And so we're able to bring those job information, those job structures into our system so that employees can report their time, whether that be in a timesheet or on a mobile app or on a tablet app. All those jobs and those subcategories all appear. It's all in real time. Employees can pick the jobs that they're tracking their time on. And one of the issues with that is getting accurate time or labor allocation to these jobs and orders and projects. And then getting it into the job cost system or project management system in a timely fashion so that you can actually, look at when you're on an overage in a particular project and even for things like just billing the customer if you're on a time and material billing process with your customer. So what I'd like to do today in my PowerPoint is just kind of go over some of the time clock hardware device options that are out there and give you kind of an overview of the differences between some of these devices. We'll talk a little bit about scheduling. We have two flavors of scheduling and explain the difference between the two. There is a web-based timesheet employees can log into. I'll talk about some of the functionalities in that, as well as the mobile and tablet apps and the employee portal. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the things that we do in our system that sort of alleviates payroll, like what we call the pre-payroll process, which are things like, running overtime and stat holiday calculations and rounding of hours and things like that. Then I'll touch a little bit on how we integrate with some of these systems that I mentioned before. And then finally, what I'd like to do is actually give you a demo of the software. It'll be a very brief one. I'm hoping to get about 20 minutes into our demo, and we'll just give you a view of the system, and we'll take you through what I call sort of the life cycle of time and attendance. So I'm going to get a lot done here, so I'm going to talk very quickly, and I hope I don't confuse anybody. So biometric time clock devices. A lot of people often think of fingerprint devices like this one here. It's a great way to prevent body punching. The system looks at the pattern in your fingerprint, determines who you are, and clocks you in and clocks you out. One of the issues we have with this device is sometimes we get pushback from the from the workforce regarding capturing your fingerprints. So some employees have an issue with having their fingerprints captured. Depending on what state you're in, there are some laws where you have to explain the process and have the employee buy-in in order to do that, to deploy a fingerprint device. They do work very well. The employee has to have a fingerprint that's legible. If they're working with their hands, sometimes there's grease on their fingers. It's hard to detect the fingerprint. So that's some of the issues. And also, fingerprints can be rubbed out if you're a blue collar worker and you're working with your hands. So some of the issues that we've seen with the fingerprint devices. This next device is called the hand punch. What it does is it looks at the geometry of your hand to determine who you are. So it takes some dimensions of your fingers and your palm and things like that to figure out who you are. The nice thing is that it doesn't capture your fingerprint, so there's no privacy concerns with this. And it's a great device for body punching. Now, I will say, I brought up this slide for a couple of reasons. First of all, the manufacturer of this of this device no longer makes this device. So why did I bring it up? Well, there may be some of you who actually use this currently in your environment. The device, there are no parts for it available from the manufacturer, so it can't really be serviced. And they're being phased out. Now, these devices do work for long periods of time for many, many years, so they shouldn't have a problem using them. But our software is able to support these devices. So if you do have these devices and you're using them just to clock people in and out, oftentimes clients will just download a flat file from these devices in order to key it into payroll. Our system does support these devices, as well as some of the other devices that we offer. But you can use this device with our current system. And the nice thing is that you can use it in a way where if you have multiple devices in your environment, you can use multiple types of devices. So if any of these fail on you, you can upgrade it with a different device, like the one I'm about to show you. So this is also a biometric device. It's called an IT100 by a company called Iris ID. It's a 7-inch color touchscreen display, and it uses both facial and iris recognition technology to determine who you are. Reason why we like this device is we've tested facial recognition devices in the past, and we've just found it very challenging. The face has to be always sort of the same from when you enroll. So if you grow a beard, you've got a scarf around the bottom of your face, or you're wearing a hat, facial recognition can be a challenge. Where with this device, it uses both facial and iris. And so what it's doing is it's reading any parts of your face that are visible in conjunction with your iris to determine who you are. So the success rate of clocking in and clocking out is far greater than any other device that we've tested. So it's a fairly new device. We're getting a lot of great feedback from it. It can be used in a non-contact method, so that all you have to do is walk up to the device, it looks at your face and your iris, and it clocks you in. And it even has, as an option, it has a thermal scanner on it, so that when you do clock in, it'll read your temperature. And you can set a threshold where, for example, you don't want anybody coming to work if they have a fever of 101 degrees Fahrenheit. The system will prevent anybody from clocking in if they reach that threshold. And then there's also an email alert that's generated out of our system that will notify the manager for that employee, telling them that this person, Lauren Williams, has attempted to clock in with a temperature of 102. So a great way to help prevent not just COVID concerns, but any type of sickness where an employee shouldn't be in their environment working. And we've had a lot of great success with this device, so it's a very popular one. So let's talk a little bit about scheduling. In our system, we do have something called shift management, and it's not scheduling, but there are two different things. With our system, shift management is something that happens on a regular basis and that doesn't change. And so you create shifts in our system and you assign the employees to those shifts. And our system just always knows when an employee should be showing in, what day, what time they're supposed to show up, and what time they're supposed to leave. Again, in a very a static environment where it's always the same and it doesn't change. With scheduling, we do have two flavors of scheduling. We have our standard scheduling, and I'll show you that in our demo. We also have what we call our advanced scheduling. There's reoccurring schedules, there's rotations it handles. It'll match it'll allow you to schedule employees on jobs or projects. There's a request for shift swaps for employees to swap with other employees. With an approval process that has to happen by the manager. It auto calculates overtime as you're creating your schedule, so you're aware of what overtime, what the hours look like by earnings code for each employee. And if you don't want to have your employees fill out timesheet, you can convert these schedules into timesheets, so they don't even have to fill it out. They just log into it. They can make any revisions and then approve their timesheet. So very flexible that way. We do have a timesheet. It's, again, browser-based. Everything in our system is browser-based. It's very customizable. We can custom tailor, and you can do it yourself as an administrator. You can pick and choose what columns you want to include in the timesheet. You can relabel those columns. There is the ability to track your time against jobs and projects that come from either Sage Intacct or Sage 300. It'll show you your accrual balances when you're filling out your timesheet, what your availability is. in terms of hours. There is integration to HR, the Sage HRMS and Criterion HRMS systems. There's a whole manager approval process where managers can log in and review people's time and make any edits and changes and approve the time before it goes to the payroll administrator. And it is a multi-level approval process. So if you wanted to go from your supervisors to a director or a manager of a location, you can include multiple levels of approval. We have a tablet app called Sonic Tablet App, and it works both on the Android and Apple environments. This is a great way to sort of create a clock in and clock out environment in your workplace where maybe you have a lot of different locations and purchasing time clock devices may be a little bit expensive. And so you can install this app on as many devices as you like. Tablets are very inexpensive these days, so they're a great way to save some money. If you really just care about having employees clocking in and out of a device, that's a great way of doing it without the cost of a time clock, a physical time clock device. And again, there's project job cost allocation here, so employees can clock in and pick a department or projects or work orders that they're clocking in and out of. They can even do things like review their timesheet or their schedule right on this app. We have a mobile app, again, both Android and Apple iOS. There's two functions in here. You can use it as a timesheet entry application where you enter your time, or you can restrict that from happening so your employees have to clock in and clock out on a regular basis. There is a job cost integration or service order integration, so employees who have to track their time against job can do it with this app. There's geotagging, so when you clock in or clock out, it records the coordinates of where you are when you clocked in and out. And then there's also geofencing, so you can create a geofence around specific or authorized areas or neighborhoods where an employee is allowed to clock in and out of. So if they try to clock in from an unauthorized location, the app will basically tell them you're not authorized to clock in from this current location. And they have to physically be in a location where they're allowed to clock in or out of. We have an auto travel calculation. So if you have employees in the field, our system's able to detect every time you stop the job and every time you started a job. And then we auto fill the in-between gaps, the gaps in between the jobs with a travel calculation. And we can also send that to job costs or to payroll. We can reimburse the employee based on the travel as well. And they can also request time off and view schedules right from the app. So it's pretty feature-rich app. So the employee portal allows employees to log in, view their schedules, change departments. They can see how much time that they've worked in the current pay period or previous pay periods. They can enter their schedule availability. They can review time off balances. Again, if we're accruing time, they can see what their availability is. They can request time off. There's an email notification that gets sent to the manager notifying them that an employee is requesting some time off. And again, they can request shift swaps here. And there is email notifications as well when a shift has been approved or a time off request has been approved to the employee. So I talked a little bit earlier about integration. We do integrate to the Sage HRMS and Criterion HCM payroll systems. If you're just using the Sage 300 application and you're not using an HR system, that's fine too. We have full integration to the Sage and Intacct job cost and payroll modules. Of course, there's no payroll module in Intacct, but there is in Sage 300. So there's a full integration. It's bidirectional. Employee information goes back and forth. You create a new hire, it appears in Manusonic, and then the employee can start tracking their time in our system. At the end of the pay period, we're able to do a transfer, and I'm going to show you that in our quick demo back into Sage 300 so that you don't have to rekey anything into the Sage 300 payroll system. And the integration is not an import or an export. It's actually an API. It's called an API integration. So there's validation of the data. You can't mess anything up. It has full error reporting if there's anything wrong with the data when you're doing a transfer to payroll. And you never have to key anything in manually. And so I'm going to show you that in our demonstration. We're going to switch and we're going to log into Sage 300. I'm going to walk you through the process of the integration from Sage 300 payroll. I'm going to be very quick about it. I do want to show you as much as possible. So forgive me if I'm going quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the point of, or I'm going to show you the integration from Sage 300 payroll. If you're using a payroll service provider like ADP or Ceridian or PayChoice or Paychex, there is an export process out of our system that will generate a file that you can upload to these payroll service providers. There's really no integration with these payroll service providers because there's no way for us to do that. There's no API. If you're using another payroll system that is in-house, that's not Sage 300, there's possibility of doing a API integration with that as well. We're pretty flexible when it comes to building new integrations. This is the login process. The login point of login is the same for all employees, and the system console sort of changes depending on who you are. We have 3 classes of users in our system. There's an administrative user, there's a manager user, and there's an employee user. So we're going to log in very quickly as an administration user. And before I talk about the widgets and the dashboard here, I want to get Aaron to just log us into Sage 300 payroll. So I'm actually going to demonstrate the integration between Sage 300 payroll and our system. So we're going to create a new hire here in Sage 300. For those of you who are using Sage 300 payroll, this is going to probably look pretty familiar to you. So we'll just very quickly create a hire. We'll put in the bare minimum information to create a new hire for payroll. We'll call this person Stephen Phelps. And so while Aaron's doing that, what I'd like to do is explain the integration. And when we set this up, it's very flexible in terms of what information we grab from Sage Payroll. We're able to access any of the tables in the system. We can get things like, obviously, the name of the employee ID, the pay group they belong to, what cost center they belong to. Everybody in Sage Payroll has a default cost center, and that cost center is carried forward into our system. But there's additional information like the supervisor that the employee belongs to that we're able to grab as well and bring into our system. So you, as an administrator, you literally don't have to do anything after you've onboarded the employee into payroll. If you're using the Sage HRMS system, information would be keyed in, or the onboarding process happens in HR, and then that employee flows into payroll. But if it's in payroll, then we can grab it and bring it into our system. So you're not having to rekey anything, and it limits the possibilities of error. So we're going to add this new hire, Stephen Phelps, and we're going to save it in Sage 300 Payroll. And there's an integration link that you would use in Sage 3 Payroll if you're set up on our system that says send employee to Sonic, which is the process that makes that transfer of that information. Now, our system is typically scheduled to do this on a nightly basis. It checks for new hires and changes for the employee. But if you wanted to add an employee right now and have them in the system so they can key in their time or report their time or clock in and out, you can execute that process right away. So let's go on to back to the Sonic Web Enterprise application. If we look at the employees screen and we do a search for Stephen Phelps, we're going to see that here's the information that we just created in Sage 300 Payroll. Stephen's information is all in here, his name, his user ID, the shift, the cost center organizational structure, the pay group, security group, his email address, all that can be brought in from Sage Payroll. So let's log in as a manager, and we'll go through. Actually, before we do that, Aaron, let's just talk a little bit about shift management and scheduling. So first, we'll talk about shift management in our system. I mentioned this earlier. This is where you would set up a shift, and you can create as many shifts as you want in our system, give them a code and a description. And essentially what you're doing here is you're defining the days of the week for this shift. And for each day of the week, you're defining a start time and an out time. There's an hour rounding process that occurs, and you can set that up in here as well. And what it does is it allows you to give a grace period for the clock in and the clock out for employees. So if you have a grace period of 7 minutes, for example, and an employee clocks in within 7 minutes, the employee's going to get paid for their full shift. It is going to state that he was a little late, but he will get paid, or she will get paid for their entire shift. They clock in 8 or 9 minutes later, we can round the time forward by any amount. Typically, it's 15 minutes. So the nice thing about the shift management in our system is it's a set it and forget it approach to scheduling. So once you create this, you never have to manage it or review it or anything unless there's any changes. So we do have scheduling. So we'll just kind of look at the basic scheduling in our system, our standard scheduling. Our advanced scheduling could take up a couple of hours of demonstrating, so I won't get into all that. But this is a very quick and easy way for creating schedules for employees in our system. Manager logs in and they basically come to each of the employees, hit the edit button, and just key in a shift, or a common shift, or even create a custom shift for an employee on each day of the week. And this is just an easy way of creating schedules for your employees. Doesn't take a lot of time. It's simple. You just key in the start and end time, or pick the shift that you want the employee to work. There's a description field, and you can just save it. You can copy forward these schedules in future weeks as well. So if things don't change all the time very much, then you can copy them forward and just make edits and changes into the following week. It'll show you the total number of hours that you've scheduled the person for the day, and a total number of hours for the week. At the very bottom, you can look at your entire group to see how many hours you've scheduled the entire group of people for the entire week. Okay. So moving along, we've talked about the schedules and shift management. So let's log in now as a manager. So we're going to log in as a manager. And we're just going to go to the timesheet. Actually, before we go to the timesheet, Aaron, maybe we can talk a little bit about the dashboard and the widgets. We briefly mentioned this in the beginning, but this is a great way of getting a kind of a top-level view of what's happening in your environment. As a manager, when I log into the system, I'm only getting the information with regards to my direct reports and not the entire organization or company. So these are an example of 3 different widgets that we have. The nice thing is we can create widgets, custom widgets for our clients based on your requirements. The first one just sort of shows you what your current pay period looks like from an hours perspective, and by earnings code. So you can see how much regular time you have, how much overtime you have in your group, and how much vacation time that's in your group. The nice thing about this widget is that it's actually calculating these different plans, these different overtime and double time and vacation time. It's actually calculating this in the current pay period. So you can see it's sort of a live look at this point in time of what your hours look like. If you're in a situation where your overtime is high, the pay period is not over yet, you can have people take some time off without pay. or at least offer them that. And but this gives you a view of what your hours look like by earning code without having to wait till the end of the pay period to look at it. The other widget shows you what your attendance looks like for the day, the start time, the end time. So if anybody's clocked in and if they're clocked out, it'll show you what time they clocked out. This is just a quick glance at who's in today if you're using a clock. There's the absence today widget as well. And if you've been on shift or scheduled to work today and your shift has already started and you haven't clocked in, this is giving you your manager a view of who's missing that should be in. It should be in today. Again, it's only for today. Okay, so let's look at the timesheet real quick. So we're just going to go in and create a timesheet entry for Stephen Phelps. And so again, this is a very customizable timesheet. We can pick and choose which columns we want to appear. So we're just going to select the date, the first day of the week, which is Monday, and then put in a start and end time. And by doing that, it'll automatically calculate the hours. And by the way, if you want employees to clock in and out from their computer, we're also able to have that as a function in our web portal and in the employee portal, so that they're not actually keying in their time. They actually have to be physically at their computer and log in and hit the clock in function. So what we're going to do is just create some time here. We can override any of the earnings, override any of the cost centers, the location, division, or department. As you can see, it's automatically choosing the default for Stephen, but if I wanted to pick a different department, I can pick a different department. Here's the project and phase and category. So if you're job costing, here are all the jobs in the system that are active, where you can pick and choose what job you're working on and all the subcategories. It's a quantities field, there's resource field, which you can actually apply any kind of an expense, miles expense, meals expense. There's quantity field and the description field. So let's save this and just create a full week of time for Stephen. And sorry, Aaron, you want to just create yeah, thank you. And we're just going to use the copy feature here to create a couple more copies. This is a great way to just auto copy from one entry for the entire week or for the entire pay period. So if you're doing the same thing on a regular basis, rather than keying it in for every day, there's a quick and easy copy feature to do that. Okay, so we have some overtime here as well. And that'll appear when we calculate the overtime. Very quickly, I just want to show you the portal. And beg your pardon, I just need 1 minute here. I lost my Zoom meeting. Here we go. Sorry about that. So this is our portal, the employee portal. Employees can come in here and look at their timesheet, look at the amount of hours they work for the current pay period, for previous pay periods. They can look at their accrual balances, sick, vacation, bank time. We manage all those types of plans. There's a request for time off, for the employee can click on that tab and request specific days. They just need to key in the number of hours and the day that they want to take off. They can look at their schedule to see when they're working. They can also look at the schedule for their entire department. They want to see who's working on which days in case they want to request this to do a shift exchange. And there's also a request tab that we can come here and just key in a request for time off. Just real quickly, Aaron, if you want to just create one-time transaction for, just key in the hours and pick the day that we want off. and it'll generate this vacation request transaction. You hit the submit button. It'll send an email to your manager notifying them that you're requesting to take Friday, September the 30th off. And then once your manager reviews it and approves it, an email gets generated and sent back to the employee, notifying them that their request has been approved. Okay, so that's the portal. And I'm sorry, I'm rushing through this. I really can't show everything in a short period of time, but I want to go back and log in as administrator again and just go through a couple of more functions before we finish. We're actually going to go in and calculate overtime for this employee. So we have a very robust overtime calculator. The nice thing about our system is it handles all this functionality before you're sending it to payroll. So you don't have to rely on payroll to do this. Ours is a very flexible system for calculating overtime or stat. You can create these profiles, and each profile is a definition of how you calculate overtime for employees. Whether it's the week, the pay period, or the day, it handles all of the above. It'll even auto-generate a lunch break for you based on a rule. Like, for example, in this case, it's 0.5 hours of a lunch. And the rule is if you've worked more than 6 hours in a day, it'll generate a lunch break automatically for you. So the employee doesn't have to clock in and out. If you want the employee to clock in and out of lunch, you can do so, have them clock in and out. If you define the lunch break and they go over the allotted time, then our system will automatically reduce their work hours by the allotted time by the amount of time that they went over. And you can create these profiles, as many of these profiles as you like. When you create these profiles, you basically just assign the profile to the employees. So you can calculate overtime for different groups. Sometimes our clients have employees who don't want to get paid overtime. You can create a bank group like this and have all the overtime hours go into a bank time, and then the employee can request to redeem their time. Okay, so that's overtime. Very quickly, I just want to talk about statutory holidays. There's a function in our system that does this. We during implementation would ask you what the rule is in your organization or your company on qualifying for a stat holiday. Essentially, we code it into our system and you never have to worry about it. The only thing you need to do in our system is come to this function and define what day the stat holiday falls on. Once you do that, you hit the add entries button. Our system will run through all the time transactions in the pay period. It will find out who qualified for the stat. It'll insert a stat transaction for those who qualified. And if somebody worked on a stat holiday, you can even define what earnings code to override that transaction with. Like in this example, we have one called stat worked or overtime or double time. So if it finds that somebody worked on a stat holiday, it'll apply that earnings code to that person's transaction. So you just need to come here and hit add entries. It literally takes a few minutes to run stat in our system for all your employees. So we're just going to quickly go and run overtime. You can do this for the entire group. If you have multiple pay periods, you can break it down by different pay periods or different pay groups. But there is a way to do it for all pay groups, for all overtime calculations, so that you're not having to do it multiple times. So we calculated overtime. Just want to show you a couple of reports. We have a very full-featured report writer in our system or generator in our system. There are probably about 130 reports that we ship our product with or install our product with. I'll just quickly show you a couple of reports. The first one's a summary report. There are some filters, and I won't get into all that, but you can assign filters to filter out information in our system. Like if you wanted to run this report for a specific employee, you can just pick the employee code and hit preview, and it'll run just for that employee. So let's preview this one report. And this is going to show you a breakdown of all the employees by division, department, and their total number of hours by earnings code. for each person and by each earnings code and for the entire week or pay period. There's more detailed reports in our system that'll show you the breakdown of hours. And this report's going to break down the hours by day that the employees worked. And it's going to show you the total number of hours by earnings code for each day and a total for the employees and for all employees in your group. Okay. One final report I want to show you before we do our last function, which is the transfer, is the punctuality report. So I mentioned that our system has a shift or a schedule, and if somebody clocks in or logs their time in after their shift or schedule, it counts it as a late count, even if the employee hasn't been docked or the hours haven't been rounded based on the rule. This report is going to show you the total number of times that an employee has been late, how many minutes they're late, how many times they clocked out early, and how many minutes that resulted in. You can run this report for the week, for the pay period, for the month, or the entire year. It's a great report to run if you're doing performance reviews. Okay, so that's the reports. The last thing for us to do, since we ran over time and stat, is to do a transfer back into payroll. So to do that, we're going to go back to Sage 300 payroll, and we'll say import time cards, select the date range for the pay period, and click OK. And I mentioned that there is full error reporting. So if there was an error with any of these transactions, it would show you the error, what the error was. And in this case, it's uploaded 5 out of 5 employees, and it's 100%, and it's correct. So if we go to the time card for Stephen Phelps, in Sage 300 payroll, we're going to see all the hours in the time card that were uploaded for Stephen Phelps. So they're all in here. We didn't key these in. There's 2 options. You can key them. You can have the transfer work in this method where all the details are here. If you didn't want that, our system can summarize the hours by earnings code, and it'll total the hours by earnings code, so you don't see all the details here. Some of our clients wish to see the details here because they want the details printed in their pay stub. If you don't, it can be summarized. So there's an option there. Now, going back to Sonic Enterprise, if you're not using Sage 300 payroll, if you're not using Sage 300, or if you're using Sage Intacct and you're using a payroll service provider, in the links menu, there would be a link for a transfer to, an export for a payroll file. It'll be set up for you. You select again the date range for the transfer file, and you click on create, and it'll generate a file for you to upload to your payroll system that you're using. So that's the entire life cycle of time and attendance. And I think I did a pretty good job of coming in, but I'm a few minutes late. So I'll open it up to questions and answer period right now.
So we had actually a few questions that came in.
Okay.
We'll try to go a little quick because I know we're kind of going over time.
Yeah, apologize.
One of the questions that came in, it says, can you add restrictions to requesting time off?
Yeah, absolutely. You can add restrictions, and you can even allow for sort of a bit of a grace amount in the restriction. So for example, if you don't want anybody requesting time off unless they have it, it can work that way. If you want them to allow them and just, decide whether or not you want to give them the time off, it'll allow you to do that as well if you decide to do that. And then it'll just put the employee into a negative for that request time off. And that way, you can decide when if you want to do that. And then there's also a restriction that you can apply that says, well, we'll allow employees to go into an 8-hour negative as well. So very flexible.
Perfect. And then we'll take one more question. The other question was, how long does it take to implement your application?
So Generally, we always tell people anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on how many rules there are, how many employees, how many locations you have, are you using hardware, things like that have to be set up. But generally speaking, it's anywhere between 3 to 6 months. It has gone over in the 6 months. We have done implementations that have taken longer than 6 months, but generally speaking, there are larger implementations. We did one location, a food court company that has 187 locations across the US. We did that in 9 months. So, there's some variables there.
Okay, perfect. And with that, just with time, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you all for joining us today. If you guys do have any questions, please reach out to your assigned account manager or give us a call at 407-965-2411. If you haven't yet, follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest content on third-party products. We'd like to say thank you again for Dan and Aaron for giving us a great presentation, and we look forward to seeing you guys on our next webinar Wednesday.